Hello, this is Pastor Manjin Yu, retired pastor with First Evangelical Church Arcadia. Over time, I've thought a lot about the Christian life, and I've recorded a series called The Possible Christian Life. And it's about practically how to live the Christian life. A lot of times people have come to me and said, "Hey, Pastor, I've been trying to live the Christian life, but it just doesn't work." Understandable, but my premise is to say it's not about trying to live the Christian life. It's about training to live the Christian life. And you could actually go to YouTube with my handle at Mongensu to see the recordings there. This is lesson 8 today. And the lesson 8 today is on action and intention. I've been thinking a lot about this because people come up to me and say, Pastor, I know I said harsh words to my wife, but my intention was good. I've said harsh words to other people, and I screamed at them, but my intention was good. Well, the thing is, people don't ever judge your intention. People just judge by what you do. And so, how do we reconcile action and intention? You may have very good intention, but if your action came out wrong, it doesn't work. Or your actions may be good, but your intentions are not good. That doesn't work either. So today I want us to explore this. And for me, one of the best ways to explore this is with this one issue that Jesus dealt with almost all of his career in 3.5 years, and that is about the Sabbath. So let's begin with the origin of the Sabbath. And the origin of the Sabbath obviously is Genesis. And this is Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. And Jesus and God basically is talking about creation. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation. So he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. So then we see this now. Genesis is written by Moses. And so Moses is now referring back to the origin of the Sabbath because of the Ten Commandments. Now, the Jews at the time of Moses, they were in bondage for 430 years. And in Exodus 12, it tells us that it was 430 years. And so they did not really know God at that point because the original 400 years before, it was with Joseph. Joseph had an intimate relationship with God. But now, this is 430 years later, and Moses now is going to have to reestablish. Moses did a lot of signs and wonders. There was the 10 plagues, there was the crossing of the Red Sea. And so we see that as the hand of God leading. So now, 430 years later, we have the 10 Commandments. So the 10 Commandments uh, are 10, and they're summarized here. And so you can actually, most scholars will say that you can look at the first four, which is our relationship with God, and the last six, which is our relationship with each other. But however, I see the fourth commandment, which is about the Sabbath, more of a transitional commandment. What do I mean by that? It means that this commandment is about our relationship to God, keeping the Sabbath holy, but it also has a lot of implications on our relationship with each other. But of course, also, if you see, there's also the you must not murder, you must not commit adultery, which I will take a quick look at later. But we want to concentrate on the Sabbath. Okay. And then in Deuteronomy, Moses again reminds the people, hey, how important are these commandments? In Deuteronomy 6:6, it says, these commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on your door frames of your house and on your gates. Very serious is what God is saying. These commandments are so serious. They should be with you all the time. Today, some Orthodox Jews actually do that. And in this image on the left, you will see this young man. He binds all this, and you can see a small square on the top of his head and a small square above his elbow on his left hand. And inserted inside are Bible verses. And they walk around like this to signify how important is the Word of God in their lives. Tie them on your forehead, bind them on your hands. And on the image on the right is this verse 9. Write them on the door frames of your houses. So this man actually has Bible verses that he's nailing to the door. Now, it is action, okay? And this is very important for them because they want to follow the law to the letter. Well, you can argue Jesus said the same thing too in Matthew 5:17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter or the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. The older translations will tell you not any jot or tittle. What Jesus is saying, no, every stroke of the commandments I have come to fulfill. Can it be any more literal than that? It is very literal. Now let's look specifically at the fourth commandment, okay? So this is about the Sabbath. So let's read together. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigner living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, and the sea, and everything in them. But on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Okay, very, very clear, very, very direct. But we can still divide this into two parts. The bright yellow part is what I call the letter of the law. And this is the action part. Okay, very clear. 6 days you work, 7th day you're not supposed to work. Who's included? Male, female, servants, foreigner, etc., etc. So it is actually listed very clearly. But it is not the whole story. There is a second part to it, which I call the spirit of the law, which is the intention of why the law has action. Action, intention, and it's in blue. Why do you have to keep the Sabbath? Because it is holy day. Why do you have to keep the Sabbath? Because it's dedicated to the Lord. And because the Lord is the Lord of the Sabbath, and therefore it is set apart. So there's a portion where is the action. There's a portion that is intention. And sometimes actions and intentions can be far apart. Or we can so concentrate on the action that we just don't look at the intention. Or vice versa. We look so much in the intention, we don't care about how we do the action. Okay? But both of them have to be attuned, and both of them have to be taken care of. And so look at murder. Okay, this is one of the commandments. You have heard our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, etc., etc. But the thing is, Jesus says, it's not just the act of murder that is a sin. It is even the thinking of it. Because you can say, I'm so angry at a person, I can kill him. But of course, I can't murder. So I'm okay. It's just my heart is just, whenever I see him, I want to kill him, but I just restrain myself. Jesus, that's not enough. Because Jesus goes to the heart of the spirit of the law, the intention of the law. The intention of the law is to be able to live in peace. Not just that you can hate somebody. What about adultery? We know about this. You have heard it was said, you must not commit adultery. But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. What is Jesus saying here? Jesus is saying, wait a minute. The issue is the heart. The heart has to be aligned with the action. The intention has to be aligned with the action. You can say, oh, I don't commit adultery, but I just lust after. I flirt with this woman. I try to get as close. I just text with her, all these sexy texts, but I'm not committing adultery. I don't fall into that line of action, but my intentions are bad. Jesus, no. Your intentions rule and govern your action. And so with the Sabbath, Jesus had a number of encounters. We don't have time to look at all of them, but here's a few of them. The leader in charge of the synagogue was indignant that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day. There are 6 days of the week for working. He said to the crowd, come on those days to be healed, not on the Sabbath. Now you got to understand, there was not many people being healed at the time of Jesus. In fact, Jesus says, if you don't believe my words, believe my miracles. So there's not that people, but you see, they just wanted to follow the letter of the law. Oh, you did something, and that's considered healing. Now, how did Jesus answer? You hypocrites, each of you works on the Sabbath. Don't you untie your ox or donkey from its stall on the Sabbath and lead it out for water? This dear woman, a daughter of Abraham, has been held in bondage by Satan for 18 years. Isn't it right that she should be released even on the Sabbath? You see that? Jesus is saying, well, there's an intention to this. The intention is mercy on a woman who needs mercy. And the Sabbath was the occasion for it. But you see, the action, Jesus's action and his intentions were very aligned. Whereas for the leader, it was only action that matters, and they don't care. And by the way, this is what happens with the Pharisees. What about Sabbath and work? On the Sabbath, Jesus went to eat dinner in the home of the leader of the Pharisees, and the people were watching him closely. There was a man there whose arms and legs were swollen. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in religious law, is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day? Yes or no? When they refused to answer, Jesus touched the sick man and healed him and sent him away. Then he turned to them and said, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out? Again, they could not answer. You see what I'm saying? If you are always following the letter of the law, your intentions don't matter. But what Jesus is saying, we follow the letter of the law because the intentions are important. You are driving and the sign says speed limit, 65 miles an hour. Now you can follow the law literally 65 miles an hour. But I was in traffic school at one time and the instructor said, if there's somebody that is driving so fast in the back, you can't just say, I'm going to stay at 65 because this is what the law says. I got to move away because we don't know what the intent is. It could be people being saved. It could be trouble. It could be whatever. And so there's the spirit of the law. There's the letter of the law also. And so that's what Jesus is trying to push. So the Sabbath and work is that, wait a minute. Your son falls into the pit. You don't say, sorry, man. Sorry, I don't do anything. I'm not going to work on the Sabbath. But even today, a lot of Orthodox Jews, they follow as much the letter of the law. So I know a Jewish family, an Orthodox Jewish family, and he told me we don't drive on Sunday, on the Sabbath, which is the sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday for our calendar. And he said, we have to live close to the synagogue. And he says, unfortunately, close to the synagogue, many of the properties are not well maintained and they're very expensive. Why? Because you have a ready captive audience. They want to live close so they don't have to walk. And then he will tell me, he says, you know, I have to go visit my dad and I have to walk to my dad. And sometimes it's hard and it's understandable. But then in old Jewish law, 2,000 years ago, Jesus' time, the Pharisees were regulating every single action. And so if the law is the letter only, you have to get clarification for everything. So it is said that, you would go to the Pharisees and say, I need to walk on the Sabbath because I need to get somewhere. I need to go see my dad. My dad is sick. I gotta need to go see my dad. Um, how far is he? Well, he's 1 mile. Well, okay, then they have to tell you if you walk under 1 mile, it's not considered work. If you walk over 1 mile, it is considered work. Well, I need to write letters. Well, if you write 2 letters, that's not considered. If you write 3 letters, that's good. So it gets to be very tedious and also everything's to the letter. But is that what God intends for the Sabbath to be? And Jesus was challenging this by saying, this is Sabbath, this is work. They don't go together. But wait a minute. When we're setting somebody free, why not? And there's other things, right? This is Sabbath and law. Jesus replied, I did one miracle on the Sabbath and you were amazed. But you work on the Sabbath too, when you obey Moses' law of circumcision. Actually, this tradition of circumcision began with the patriarchs, long before the law of Moses. For if the correct time for circumcising your son falls on the Sabbath, go ahead and do it so as not to break the law of Moses. So why should you be angry for me for healing a man on the Sabbath? Look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly. Let me explain. Under Moses' law, boys, when they're born, they have to be circumcised on the 8th day. Okay, that's a requirement. That's the law. So what Jesus is saying here, wait a minute, let's talk about this. If your son is born and you count the days, the 8th day after he was born, in order for circumcision to happen, and it happens to fall on the Sabbath, what do? You have 2 laws that are in conflict with each other. One says you have to circumcise your son on the Sabbath, on the 8th day. One says you can't work on the Sabbath. But Jesus says, if the 8th day falls on the Sabbath, you do it anyway. And it's really not considered a conflict. If you look at the spirit of the law, then you'll begin to understand. But if you look only at the letter of the law, you can't. Now, in most recent days, there are people who actually follow the letter of the law. So this is a movie that happened many 20-some years ago. It's called Chariots of Fire. If you've never watched this movie, you should. It's talking about young men, and one of them is Jewish, and one of them is a Christian, and his name is Eric Liddell. Eric Liddell became a missionary to China, and he died with a brain disease when he was in China. But he was a participant of the Olympics in 1924, in the Paris Olympics. And he loved the Lord so much. And one of his trial heats was on Sunday. And he says, you know what? I'm not going to violate Sunday because it is a Sabbath and I want to keep it holy. It's following the letter of the law. But his heart's intention was always about God. Now, he did win the gold medal. He didn't win the gold medal for the 100, but he did win for the 200 because the trial heat was not on Sunday. But he was very strict in how he follows, okay? And for some people, that would be the case, okay? But in reality, for all practical purposes today, if we do that, then many things cannot happen. For example, here, all the football games, professional football games are played on Sunday. And so you can say, well, you know what? Because I want to keep the Sabbath holy, I can't play, which is fine, And we're going to address that in a little bit, okay? But again, there's the letter of the law, but there's the spirit of the law. If the two align together, you have no problems. But oftentimes, we just emphasize one without emphasizing the other. And what about ministry, Sabbath and ministry? Here's the action, here's the intention. Matthew chapter 12. Or haven't you read in the law that the priests on Sabbath duty in the temple, desecrate the Sabbath, and yet are innocent. Okay? I tell you something greater in verse 6. Then the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy and sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is the Lord of Sabbath. When I was young, growing up in the Philippines, I was in a church that was very conservative. And one time we had an interchurch basketball tournament, and it was on Sunday. And we planned everything, and we started the opening ceremony with the opening games. And then so one leader found out that we were doing it, and we were shut down. We were shut down, okay? And so we couldn't play basketball because it was a Sunday, because it was considered working, okay? But I'd come to know, as a pastor for 25 years, Sunday is a work day for me. I cannot maintain anything on Sunday because it is a work day. People call me. I have to prepare sermons and give the sermons. I have to make sure I'm working every single Sunday. My Sabbath has to not be on a Sunday because I can't. And Jesus is precisely saying that. All the priests who have to work on the Sabbath, they're working. So there's a conflict with the letter of the law. But there is an intention that Jesus wants to emphasize. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. If you thought that through, you would not have condemned the innocent. You would have given allowance and mercy towards that. And this is what Jesus is trying to say. Because the Sabbath is there to serve us, not for us to serve the Sabbath. And you'll see that in a bit. Sabbath and good deeds. And in Matthew 12, Jesus answered, if you had a sheep that fell into a well on the Sabbath, don't you work to pull it out? Of course you would. And how much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Yes, the law permits a person to do good on the Sabbath. You see that? The intention has to be right in order for the action to be right. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath, of the Sabbath. And so when we are conflicted in anything that we do, we have to be sure that our letter of the law, our action and our intention are aligned. If they're not aligned, it doesn't work. Now, Paul teaches about the Sabbath this way. So this is in Romans 14. In the same way, some think one day is more holy than another day, while others think every day is alike. You should each be fully convinced that whichever day you choose is acceptable. Those who worship the Lord on the special day do it to honor him. Those who eat any kind of food do to honor the Lord, since they give thanks to God before eating. And those who refuse to eat certain foods also want to please the Lord and give thanks to God. For we don't live for ourselves or die for ourselves. If we live, it is to honor the Lord, and if we die, it is to honor the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Christ died and rose again for this very purpose, to be the Lord of the living and the dead. Paul is saying at that time there was a conflict. Oh, you know what? What about food offered to idols? Is it okay for Christians to eat that? And Paul gives freedom. He says, you know what? There's nothing wrong with the food. But if you think it's wrong, don't eat it. But if you don't have a problem with it, go ahead and eat it. But of course, you do it, be circumspect when you do these things, because you don't want to eat it in front of other people who will be offended by it. And same thing with the Sabbath. He says, yes, Sunday is the day we set aside. But there are many people who have to work on Sunday. If I go to the ER on Sunday, I want to make sure there are nurses and doctors available there. If everybody's observing the Sabbath, I could die in the hospital. So what Paul is saying here, it doesn't matter which day, as long as you honor the Lord. And that is the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Your action must align with your intention. If you had known these words mean, Jesus says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And Jesus was quoting Hosea chapter 6. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, an acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. And so the conclusion is, quite oftentimes, we are conflicted. We don't know which way to go. Should we follow the letter of the law? Yes, the letter of the law is important because it tells us what to do. But there is the spirit of the law, which is the intention. And that is much more important. But just the intentions alone without the proper following of the action is also very important. You can't just say, my intention is good. I hurt you, but my intention is good. I insult you in public because my intention is to correct you. That's not right either. I hope you learned from this lesson today, and there will be more to come. Thank you very much for joining.